Good afternoon. Regrets for the delay as we were experiencing some technical difficulties. We now turn the launch program over to our chair.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this very important occasion. May I welcome you all, and may I acknowledge Vice Chancellor of the University of the West Indies, Professor Sir Hilary Beckles, Professor of Media and Communication at the University of Botswana, Hopetoun Dunn, Attorney at Law and Senior Tutor at the Norman Manley Law School, Miss Hilary Greenaway, and of course, man of the hour, Senator, Director for the UWI Center for Disability Studies, and author, Dr. Floyd Morris and Mrs. Morris. Other distinguished guests who may have been joining us, and members of the audience who are here with us. I see former Prime Minister P.J. Patterson, the Most Honorable P.J. Patterson, and other members of the audience who are joining us via Zoom and YouTube. Good afternoon and welcome to the virtual launch of Senator Morris's book, Political Communication Strategies in Post-Independence Jamaica, 1972 to 2006. We are so glad that you could join us this afternoon, and we thank you very much for taking the time out to do so. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the very fact that we are conducting this launch virtually this afternoon speaks to the importance and timeliness of Senator Morris's book. As we are in election season, both here in the Caribbean and the United States of America, the spotlight is also turned on the very subject that the book seeks to address. This event is also proof of the extent to which the communication landscape has changed and how essential it is for us to step out of our comfort zone if we are to maximize the opportunities that these information communication technologies offer. Virtually overnight, you will note that the coronavirus pandemic has radically transformed our social, educational, business, and other interactions. It has forced us to maintain our social distance, but here we are being visually connected and intellectually engaged through the power of this medium. As it is in our daily lives, so it is in politics. Communication is of critical importance, and this is what Dr. Morris seeks to explore in his book. He unearths and examines the communication challenges in contemporary politics and invites us to explore within the notion that, and I'm quoting now from the book, in approaches to politics, citizens have become more like consumers than believers. Politicians must work harder to retain their interest and support. The question then is, how does one communicate effectively when there are so many competing interests? One observation is that politicians must find new ways of engagement. I invite you all to read the book to see the other conclusions that Dr. Morris draws on his research. Once again, welcome. And I now invite Dr. Michael Harvey, pastor of the Maranatha District of Churches and former director for Empowerment Training and Education Projects and vice president of the Division of Spiritual Affairs at Northern Caribbean University, to pray to officially begin these proceedings. Dr. Harvey.
Thank you very much. Let us pray. Sovereign God, this afternoon we have assembled to celebrate triumph over obstacles. We thank you sincerely for your son, Floyd. To many of us, Dr. Senator Floyd Morris. We thank you that you have shown him favor. You continue to guide him as he makes his contribution to humanity. We thank you for his wife, Shelley, for his educational environment that continues to provide support and nurture to him. I pray for every person present, those who will be making their contributions. I ask that you will now pronounce your blessing on the proceedings, and that as a result of today's launch, we will see greater effectiveness as political leaders communicate messages to the populace. We ask your blessing both now and for success on this initiative is our prayer in Jesus' name.
Amen. Thank you so much, Dr. Harvey. This afternoon, we're also honored to have Vice Chancellor and President of the University of the West Indies. Vice Chancellor of the University of the West Indies, Professor Hilary Beckles, to share this event with us. Professor Beckles is a distinguished academic international thought leader, United Nations Committee official, and global public activist in the field of social justice and minority empowerment. And we'll now ask Dr. Beckles to bring us greetings. Professor Beckles.
At the creativity. And we also there are few things that give me as much pleasure as to be a part of the arrival of a new book into our world. It is like a baby stepping into our ecosystem, and we marvel at the creativity. And we also wonder about the impact the newborn will have upon the world and its future and the contribution it will make to all of the conversations and the enlightenment. Critically, our author will know that the expectation is that the work of art will outlive the author, and that it represents a tremendous sense of hope, new ideas, new thought, new perspective, bringing energy and enlightenment to what we all consider to be the common body of knowledge. This book is clearly named Political and Communications Strategy in Post-Independence Jamaica, 1972 to 2006 by Floyd E. Morris. It is therefore existentially a COVID-19 infant. And while reading, I did ask myself the question, when this work reaches adulthood, what will be the challenge that we will be facing and addressing at that time? Now, our author is a political scientist. He's also a politician. He's an educator. I am asked to analyze this work through the eyes of an historian, of a public service administrator of education, and as a development advocate. I begin by stating that I have full respect for any project of this nature. I have respect for the quality of the commitment that is necessary to create a work of this order. And when I speak of commitment, I speak of commitment within the context of things that we already know. That the author is very bright, is very intellectually gifted. But we all know that being bright and gifted is not enough. That you also need to care about your society. You have to be committed to your country. And you have to be courageous enough to do something about it. And this is precisely the kind of citizen our author is. But he is a Jamaican writing about his country, which raises the question, what is really this raw material that has stimulated his intellect and driven him to pen to write about it? And to achieve that, the answer to that question, we have to historicize. And this is where the reviewer enters the conversation as an historian. Because not to historicize Jamaica is not to understand it. And if you don't understand it, clearly you cannot research and write about it. So allow me to begin with making this first simple statement. Jamaica is the site of one of the greatest battles of modernity. It is the site of one of the greatest dramatic demonstration of what happens when freedom and oppression are placed in the same space and are seeking to resolve the internal contradiction. Jamaica is not only the site of this epic, heroic struggle, it is really the laboratory that enables us to understand where that epic battle has reached and what is the nature of the contemporary expression of that epic battle. Our distinguished colleague and mentor, Professor Patterson, has spoken about Jamaica as a society that is confounding and riddled with the contradictions of the enigma. Our author has gone about his task using a different methodology. the methodology of the dialectic. For him, dialectics, the constant turbulence and the constant conflict between the forces of freedom and the forces of order and oppression. It is in the interstices of this conflict that Jamaica has taken form as a society with deep historical roots. If you take, for example, his starting point, 1972, just one decade after decolonization, where had Jamaica reached in terms of a new vision, in terms of a new passion, a decade after it had jettisoned itself away from the colonial scaffold? 2006, 44 years after independence, 62 years after adult suffrage. Where had it reached? How had that epic battle that has been dramatized in town and country, where had it reached at this moment? First, we have to begin by looking at the character and the culture of the society that has emerged out of this historic epic struggle. Well, there are two things we know about it, and these two things in themselves have served to create what is described here as the political culture and the systems of political communications that have emerged to give vent to this culture of choice. We know that the majority of Jamaicans, and I should say we historians know, that the majority of Jamaicans have emerged out of two cultural cosmologies. The cosmology of the Coromantee, emerging out of the Ashanti culture of Ghana. And equally, we know that there are Igbos coming down the rivers of eastern Nigeria into the areas of the Cameroon and on the ships over to Jamaica. The Coromantes have been described as the warrior class of all the ethnicities that have shaped the Caribbean, because they came from a highly sophisticated political culture where the concept of justice, of freedom, and dignity are embedded in that Ashanti civilization. But we also know that the Igbos are known to be hardworking, dedicated, farming folk who love the land, who love the mountains, the vegetation, and they are deeply embedded in the celebration of the environment. But importantly, their society is built around solidarity of the group, which has helped to give Jamaicans a sense of a powerful and strong identity. That identity that is solid and secure is rooted in that Igbo philosophy. You never give up your friend. You give respect to friendship, strong sense of family, family coherence, the Igbo culture. And on the other side, there is the English creolization of colonization, in which all of that is merged with other ethnicities, creating the creolity of the Jamaican personality. This has created what is now known as the culture clash, the sound clash, and it has always been mobilized by phenomenal characters who have shaped the political landscape, the hero and the community. That is part of that historical cosmology. The hero politician and his community. Sam Sharp, the epic moment of Jamaican independence, Sam Sharp. The epic moment of freedom after emancipation, Paul Bogle. And bringing all of this into coherence, the epic global struggle of Marcus Messiah Garvey. Always epic, always grand, large, magnificent, and monumental. And that is the political culture where the island thinks global, producing heroes within the epic struggle who become global phenomena. And all the Jamaicans' heroes of the discourse are globally respected and known characters. These are all parts of the political culture that is Jamaica. But now we have in this book, in this excellent piece of work, we have two theories of the media, how all of this is transmitted beyond the moment of conflict and the moment of creativity into global and national reckoning. There is a theory of the media that its role is to mediate, literally, mediate the tensions, the dichotomies, and the dialectical features of the struggle that drives history along. Then there's also the theory that the role of the media is to manage the contradictions, clip the edges, and to ensure that the center is celebrated. Our author insists that we need to understand this dichotomy that celebrates freedom and challenges oppression, that is the engine of Jamaican politics. But it requires then an explanation for the persistent poverty that shapes the material world of this epic environment. The persistent poverty is indeed beyond the discourse of the enigma, simply because there is nothing phenomenal about it. There's nothing mysterious about it. It can be explained, it can be historicized, and this is what our author has done for us. Jamaica has been one of the most exploited nations on God's earth. The center of the British Empire, the largest community of enslaved Africans in the British Empire, the site of a phenomenal amount of wealth extracted from the nation to support the Imperial Development Project. Jamaica, therefore, was at the center of the biggest empire known in modern times. Jamaica was at the center of this British Empire. And therefore, that gives Jamaica a certain centrality in the context of its global and international dimensions. Everything, therefore, that transpired in Jamaica today has global dimensions because Jamaica was born and matured in the context of a global phenomena of imperialism. And therefore, those who have fought to create democracy out of this rubble of colonialism are men and women of great international dimensions because the project is of that nature. And so, when Sir Alexander Bustamante goes to London the first week of July 1962 to discuss a reparatory golden handshake for Jamaica after 307 years of British rule, it is an epic moment. And when the British pushed back on Jamaica's request for support, that too was epic because Jamaica then understood on the eve of independence that it was on its own. But the people had not forgotten that slavery is as totalitarian a system as you can imagine. And all totalitarian structures produce, they produce an appetite for freedom that cannot be contained. And therein lies the dichotomy, the persistent economic poverty, but a love of freedom and a love of dignity that cannot be contained by the material parameters. And so the author takes us through this journey, how to explain the mood of the political culture, the choices that are made, and how within the conflict of choice, there remains a sense of caring for the nation. We saw this recently in the midst of a pandemic. The people, they go to the ballot, there is an election. The election is conducted with dignity. And within 3 hours, the results of that conflict negotiation are declared and accepted, and the nation goes back to work. That is something that cannot be taken for granted. That is the matured expression of a democracy that is clear about what it wants. It wants freedom, it wants development, and it wants justice. But what actually happens, though, when you have a democracy with a two-party discourse, and the two political parties have found a consensus around the economic strategy for the future, but are now required to identify clearly and precisely their ideological differences within the superstructure. It is all about nation building, which is precisely what this book is magnificently about. It's about the art and the science of nation building. It is about how nation building is the end product of an historical evolution, what I call the grand epic narrative of the Jamaican people. But at the end of this conversation, though the book ends thematically in 2006, but we are moving now in the next 20 to 30 years, where the conversation is once again taking shape and form. And I have no doubt, and I am now even more convinced, having read this very important work, that Jamaica is going to emerge from this epic struggle, this epic journey, this almost biblical Old Testament struggle for freedom and justice against a very oppressive past and history, that Jamaica is going to be one of the greatest nations of modernity, precisely because this is the epic struggle of modernity. I am just happy to be here in Jamaica as a witness of this epic journey at this particular moment, and to have been able to be given the opportunity to read this very critical piece of research that has shed so much light upon the nature of this epic struggle. And so, to my friend Floyd, congratulations. We are very proud of what you have been able to achieve. This is an excellent piece of historical and political science, and it is written from a consciousness and an intellect that is not only sharp, but an intellect that is caring, that is committed, and courageous. Congratulations and very well done.
Thank you so much, Professor Beckles. Jamaica is the site of one of the greatest battles of modernity. Jamaica, one of the most exploited nations on God's earth. And despite all of that, Jamaica is epic, grand, large, magnificent, and monumental. Weighty statements, I believe, that beg for further exploration. Thank you so much, Professor Beckles. Our next speaker is Ms. Hilary Greenaway. She's an attorney at law and senior tutor at the Norman Manley Law School, where she manages the program of training leading to the award of the Legal Education Certificate. She describes herself as a deeply committed regionalist in support of Caribbean integration. Ms. Greenaway is also a member of several international professional organizations. Please welcome Ms. Greenaway, who now brings remarks. Ms. Greenaway.
Right, thank you, Madam Chair. Professor Sir Hilary Beckles, the Most Honorable P.J. Patterson, former Prime Minister, Professor Houghton Dunn, Dr. Floyd, other distinguished guests, good afternoon. I cannot begin to explain the immense pride and satisfaction that it gives me to bring remarks on this very special occasion. I do so knowing that faith and courage are exemplified in the work of this author, Dr. Floyd Morris. Today, he launches his second book, Political Communication Strategies in Post-Independence Jamaica, 1972 to 2006. And he does so in what I think we will clearly see a path to a prolific career as an author and an academic, and that is no mean feat. There are many reasons on this occasion why I'm proud and why I am happy to be bringing remarks, but I just want to focus my remarks today on the excellent read that he has created for us. I want to commend the author at the outset for the ease of language and the flow of thoughts shared in the information that he's presented. And this is important for the reach of this work. And I do think that once it is exposed to the public, that it will be very well received. Context is key in gaining full understanding, and the presentation in context of the research material, the cited information that has been done have all been excellent in my view. There is a tracking of key media policy developments and assessment of policy implications that have been done in this work, which underpin the understanding of events and happenings encountered by those who have studied in this area, and in some instances, no doubt giving them new insights and providing rich background and context, giving some historical understanding on media and communications in Jamaica. We all appreciate, I'm sure, that the media and communication ecosystem is an ever-changing one. And this is a phenomenon that is discussed in some depth in this work, tracing some of the more significant developments and certainly linking them with some government policy directions and even some global trends. I know the research rigor must have been applied because the author, you will find, speaks with intimate knowledge, which could only be reflective of intimate exposure to the facts themselves through research and actually interacting with the research. The assessments done are placed in the context of some significant developments in media globally, but with that understanding of that local impact which makes much of this work rather refreshing. Now, it is important to understand the context and the development of that industry from the perspective that the author points out or points us in the direction of future media and communications ecosystems. And this is really a window to the world perspective, which is very important. The work contextualizes big chunks of happenings in ways that bring new and sometimes complete understandings to some of the issues that have come up during that period. Floyd's understanding of the various government policy issues and the nuances and how they have led to success or failure gives us some excellent insights through the pages of this work. I mention in particular the linking of policy positions to campaign messages and messaging, to slogans and songs utilized by the various political parties over time, and how the words of the songs took on some policy meaning. And that to me brings real authenticity to the work. Now, if you're coming from somewhere other than Jamaica, this book is just as relevant because the incisiveness of the analysis and the balanced way the assessment was done helps to explain also a regional perspective from looking at it from the Jamaican lens, through the lens of the Jamaican experience. And certainly you would not necessarily be able to tell that what Dr. Floyd's political color is. It is the quality of understanding the fairness of assessment, the credence he gives, and the assessment he makes about successes he sees in several approaches taken, for example, under JLP administrations. But at the same time, he's able to look at with frankness at the acceptance of work, of acceptance by this work of failures that were registered and the assessment and why these failures may have been encountered in some of the PNP policies. And that to me supports balance, authenticity, and the analysis, the rich analysis that is brought to the work. In addition, this work is really not only a Jamaican piece of research. It has some regional flavoring going beyond just the Caribbean community or CARICOM, and looking at some of the critical policy approaches by Jamaica towards CARICOM, the Caribbean Single Market, and the Caribbean Court of Justice. And this is important for me. I'm a self-confessed regionalist. And I do think, therefore, that this work should have some regional reach and relevance. It touches on some of the most fundamental developments or developmental policy failures from Jamaica in the last 3 decades and represents an assessment of how failure to understand media, communication, and communicating approaches would have played a role. This book tells us so much about the author. It tells us that it is written perhaps by a country boy, maybe a mama's boy, but who clearly enjoyed storytelling. So that the heavy political policy information is shared with us as a good story, a story left to be continued. And I truly look forward to the next publication, perhaps looking at the period post 2006. I congratulate Dr. Morris on a job well done and another milestone reached. Congratulations, my friend. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Greenaway. Mama's boy, balance, authenticity, and rich analysis. All those descriptions of this book that Senator Floyd has produced. And I'm going to guess which one he will embrace more than any other. I'm going to guess that it is Mama's boy, because if I know him, I know that his mother is everything to him. Now, as we continue, may I recognize Senator Matthew Samuda, as well as members of the board of the University of the West Indies. Our next speaker, ladies and gentlemen, is Professor of Media and Communication at the University of Botswana, non-resident senior research associate at the School of Communication, University of Johannesburg in South Africa, and former director of the Caribbean Institute of Media and Communication, Professor Hopetoun Dunn. He's a renowned academic and foremost scholar in his field, and Professor Dunn is a molder of many minds, including mine. I will never forget him sharing his views on the importance of Caribbean people contributing to global discourse. Since, as he says, we must ensure that we are not just engaged in downloading information, but also in uploading our own intellectual concepts, endeavors, and experiences. As the one who guided Floyd through the process of completing his PhD, I am sure that Professor Dunn is as pleased with Floyd's academic accomplishments as he is with the fact that Floyd's study will now join the wider body of knowledge, both online and in print. I'm very happy to welcome Professor Dunn, who will now give us the review. Professor Dunn.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Moderator, my good friend Janet Morland Green, Most Honorable PJ Patterson, former Prime Minister, Senator Samuda, our Vice Chancellor, Professor Sir Hilary Beckles, colleagues from the UWI Press and other members of the university community, the CEO of the RGR Communications Group, Mr. Gary Allen, the book author and man of the moment, Dr. Floyd Morris and Mrs. Shelley Ann Morris, colleagues, friends all, good afternoon. I am delighted to join you from the continent of Africa. I join you from the Southern African city of Gaborone in Botswana, where it is now a few minutes to 9 p.m., based on a 7-hour time difference. But nothing would deter me from showing up and participating in this very important event, marking the launch of the book, Political Communication Strategies in Post-Independence Jamaica, 1972 to 2006, by my friend, former student and colleague, Dr. Morris. I thank Floyd and the organizers for the honor and the opportunity to offer some remarks about the book itself. And I prefer to regard my remarks as an overview rather than a review of the book. My remarks will offer some sampling of the content without denying you, the many prospective buyers of the book, the opportunity of getting to the heart of it in your own time. So in the short time that I have been allocated, I will first offer some brief comments on the structure and mechanics of the book before turning to 2 or 3 key elements which I would like to specially highlight. The book being launched today is an attractive volume, both in content and format. It consists of 198 pages, written in an accessible and well-structured manner, and copiously referenced. It is made up of 9 chapters with a separate introduction and a tight, separate conclusion. The most dense part of the book is the reference list. which consists of almost 7 pages of references. This is a giveaway to the fact that the book started life as a doctoral thesis. But for researchers in politics and in media, this reference list is indeed a bonus. So let me turn to a couple of the key issues from the book that I wish to highlight. Firstly, Dr. Morris argues persuasively that organized two-way communication between political leaders and their grassroots community level supporters can be a game changer in electoral outcomes for political parties. Whether these groups or political support structures, whether these political support structures are called groups, as in the PNP, or they are called branches, as in the JLP, Morris underlines that constant active communication which is necessary in order to be effective and successful. But he also makes clear that this political contact with the grassroots should be made not only at election time. It may not be far-fetched, therefore, for me to add that had this message from Morris's book been adhered to in the recently concluded general elections in the Caribbean region, the outcomes may have been somewhat different. Despite the coverage time frame of the book, which is 1972 to 2006, the author recognizes that emerging new means of communication directed at particular demographics could help to avert a breakdown in political communication and mitigate a deteriorating voter turnout at elections. He makes reference to social media and the internet in particular, which he argues can facilitate political engagement once people have access. And while these are deemed necessary digital tools, Morris observes that they are not sufficient and are not substitutes for direct and interpersonal political communication. Secondly, Floyd Morris's book argues that the style and outreach strategies of political leaders do matter, with each party political leader coming with his or her own personality and approach. Floyd's interest in how this actually works led him to conduct in-depth and insightful interviews with 3 Jamaican political leaders, Edward Seaga, P.J. Pattison, and Portia Simpson Miller. It will be up to you, potential purchasers of the book, to find out how Morris deploys these comparative insights in his political and communication analysis, and the lessons which were drawn from this research. I will merely indicate a key observation of the author that, and I quote, "I am not suggesting that ineffective communication is the sole cause of political apathy." He argues further that, and I quote again, "factors such as corruption, poor governance, unfulfilled expectations, disillusionment, arrogance, and mismanagement have contributed to political apathy in Jamaica and the Caribbean." However, the focus of the book remains firmly in advancing our understanding of how communication and political messaging works and how they can play into either political activism or political apathy at the base. As I reflected on Floyd's publication, I recall attending another book launch on the Mona campus many years ago. It was the launch of one of Professor Rex Nettleford's seminal work called Inward Stretch, Outward Reach, published in 1993. And I recall Professor Rex Nettleford declaring, in a way that only he could, that he wasn't sure why he was at this book launch, because, to quote him now, books should launch themselves. Well, the work that we are here to celebrate today is one that does have the capacity and content to launch is a timely intervention in the political and intellectual life of the Caribbean. It is launching itself upon a region that so far this year has had at least 6 general elections, with 5 more elections scheduled in the region before the end of December. So there's a lot of opportunity, Dr. Morris, to share and market your book for others to learn from and practice the lessons that you have so expertly articulated. Among the pending Caribbean elections this year are those in Puerto Rico and the US Virgin Islands as part of the wider and much hyped electoral event unfolding in continental United States. This will culminate in the week of November 3. We often forget that citizens in these 2 Caribbean territories will be among those who are voting and thereby joining millions of other people of Caribbean descent, such as Kamala Harris, leading in or affected by the US elections, something that affects us globally and particularly in the region. It would seem to me that political leaders and activists, wherever they are located, would stand to gain a great deal from the research and analysis that can be found in this book. It is a volume that remains relevant despite the changing circumstances caused by COVID-19 pandemic. I encourage everyone to purchase a copy of the book and thereby benefit from the valuable insights into political communication strategies in post-independence Jamaica. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Dunn. Whether you call it an overview or a review, your cogent presentation confirms that our politicians as well as our citizens must read political communication strategies in post-independent Jamaica, 1972 to 2006. I believe it will give them insights not only into how they have been conducting the whole communication process over time, but also how to proceed in the future. Thank you, Professor Dunn. And now we turn our attention to the man of the hour, author, academic, politician, Senator Dr. Floyd Morris, who will share his thoughts on the publication. Now, Dr. Morris believes that while absolute perfection may be unattainable, it is in striving for it that we achieve excellence. This philosophy has guided his life, and I can attest to that, and given him the determination and strength to achieve enviable feats. Those of you who may have read his first book, By Faith, Not by Sight, published in 2017, will already be acquainted with his life story and the fact that he's visually impaired. Nevertheless, Floyd has distinguished himself in many spheres. As a former president and current member of the Jamaican Senate, a former Minister of State in the Ministry of Labor and Social Security under the People's National Party administration, the first blind person to achieve any of these feats. He's the winner of numerous awards and was appointed by CARICOM as a special rapporteur on disability for the Caribbean in 2018. He's an internationally recognized speaker, sharing his ideas all over the world, including the United Nations and the General Conference of the Seventh-day Adventist Church in San Antonio, Texas, where he addressed a live audience of over 70,000 individuals. So Dr. Morris, as we go into the interview section now of the program, what made you choose to do your PhD in political communication? And could you please explain the term for us?
Thanks very much, Janet, and thanks to all the speakers and presenters, and thanks to those individuals who have joined in via Zoom and YouTube and Facebook. You know, I tell you, whilst I was at the University of the West Indies, I was influenced by a number of individuals while studying my first degree in communication and my second degree in politics. So individuals like Agri Brown, Hopton Dunn, Michael Witter, Professor Rupert Lewis, you know, Professor Marlene Hamilton, all of these individuals have impacted on me whilst I was doing my undergraduate and postgraduate studies. And so by the time I decided to do my PhD, I decided that, you know, I was going to conflate both my first degree and my second degree and focus on political communication. And political communication basically in creating an understanding for individuals is looking at the mechanism, the means and ways by which we communicate decision making from individuals through the media to citizens, and from citizens through the media to leaders. So basically, that is what political communication is. It is one of those disciplines that have emerged primarily since the 1950s, when we saw the emergence of radio and television globally. And since then, it has grown exponentially, especially since the advancement of the internet and the introduction of social media.
Thank you, Dr. Morris. Before we go on, may I please welcome the Honorable Philip Paulwell, who I'm told has joined us online. Welcome, Honorable Philip Paulwell. So to continue.
And what a time to introduce him, because he was the person who, you know, in 1999, I think it was, whilst Prime Minister Patterson was Prime Minister, that led the liberalization of the telecommunication industry that has contributed to the modern epoch of political communication, where we are seeing social media as a dominant means of communication.
Thank you.
Welcome, Philip.
Senator Morris. So tell us, what was the process of writing this book like for you?
Well, you know, this book emanated from the doctoral thesis that I did, and several individuals, including Professor Houghton Dunn, recommended strongly that I move to publishing the book. And one of the things that we learn at the University of the West Indies is that you publish or perish. And so, you know, I mean, you can do a good research and place it in the library, and individuals are not aware of what is in the research. So you have to move from research to actual publication. And so I decided that I was going to convert the thesis into a book. And I mean, I did extensive work on that between 2018 and present. And, you know, it went through several courses in terms of adjusting the heavy theoretical base methodological argumentations in the book, so that it becomes reader friendly. And the UWI Press, which has been extremely good, and I will recommend anybody in the university to utilize the services of UWI Press, because they were of tremendous assistance to me in terms of making sure that the book is reader friendly, because you know, you want to make sure that when you are writing a book and you are converting from a thesis, it is reader friendly and can appeal to a mass audience. And so they were very much supportive, and you know, I have to give thanks to them. I have to give thanks to all those individuals who helped in terms of the editing. Miss Carol Laws, who was tremendous. And I have to say special thanks to my wife, who, you know, supported me up and away out of bed for some long hours in the nights, you know.
Okay, did your research confirm or debunk any of your previously held notions about political communication?
Well, certainly it confirmed some of the arguments that I had about political communication. And as I watched the 2020, as I watched the 20 elections unfold, I thought that, you know, the Prime Minister got a copy of my book and read it cover to cover, you know, because as you read through, you see where the constant theme was that communicate, communicate, communicate. Because the central argument of the book is that the success or failure of a leader and his or her administration is closely hinged on effective communication. And Prof. Dunn correctly pointed out, I never argued that communication is the sole contributor to the success of the democratic process or the success of any leader. It is one of the variables that I chose to focus on in this book. And, you know, as I articulated in the book, and as I saw from practice, I realized that yes, effective communication plays a pivotal role. You know, I made a point in the book. Prime Minister Patterson has been the longest serving Prime Minister in Jamaica. And I would say, based on the parameters of democracy, thus far has been the most successful, based on the fact that he has won for himself 3 consecutive terms. And if you look at the book, you will see where critical and foundational to the success of Prime Minister Patterson was the fact that he had a strategic approach to communication. It is what the political experts regarded as strategic communicative action, where he was very strategic in how he communicated. So live and direct was a major part of his communication strategy. Face-to-face was a critical part of his communication strategy, where ministers had to be out there in the field communicating. And whenever the live and direct and the face-to-face were at play, we saw the success as demonstrated in 1993, in 1997, and in 2002. And so, you know, the book and the research that led to the book confirmed the view, the argument that the success or failure of a leader is closely linked to effective communication. And if they don't believe the argument that I presented, then just look at the election 2020, because everybody, some people laugh at Prime Minister Holness and say that boy is a PR government. But the fact of the matter is that he has PR'd his way into a second term.
Well, Floyd, one of the definitions of PR in our public relations is that it establishes and maintains mutually beneficial relationships between the person who is the organization and its publics. So probably that is exactly why the situation is the way it is in Jamaica today, after the election that just went down the other day. All right, comment on the role that the expansion of the media has played in changing the political landscape in Jamaica and the wider Caribbean in terms of people involvement in politics and also, you know, voter participation.
Wow, boy, I tell you, big question, big question, because, the media is very much the survival of any democracy. And in the early 1990s, we saw the liberalization of the media industry throughout the Caribbean, and Jamaica was a major beneficiary of that. And we saw the exponential growth in the media landscape to the point where we have, I think it's 28 radio stations, we have 3 national television stations, we have a plethora of cable providers, and the internet is there, large and in charge. And we still have the 2 national media newspapers, but there are a host of other regional newspapers that are available. So the media has been playing a significant role. And one of the things that I discovered from the research is that in the embryonic stages of our democratic development, because of the cost of media then, and because of the access to media then, individuals would depend on the political parties and their structures for information. So, for example, in the 1940s, 1950s, 1960s, you had a heavy dependence on the groups and the brand structures. But you see, as the evolution took place in the media. We saw a less reliance and dependence on the groups and brand structures in terms of information. And we are where we are now, where individuals have the internet and social media emanating from the internet, where they can access information at their fingertips, so they don't have to depend on the group structures and the branches for their information. This is not to say that the groups and branches are irrelevant, because if it is that the political parties do not have a means of formulating and structuring their information and packaging it and getting it to the citizens and getting feedback and getting input from the citizens, then you're gonna have a situation where there is a disengagement with the political parties, as we have seen, because this is what is happening to the political parties in Jamaica today. Why we are seeing this low voter turnout, because politicians want the easy way out. They want to be able to just have the election and get it out of the way. And I mean, they don't want to keep the communication going in the off cycle, in the off season, when they have to go and interact with the people. Face-to-face communication still have a pivotal role to play, because the people still have this culture where they want to see, they want to smell, they want to touch their politicians, their leaders. And we have to find a way to integrate and merge both the traditional means of communication along with the exponential growth and transformation that has taken place in new media. And Ms. Greenaway, in her presentation, spoke to looking forward to the next volume. I can say that work is already at a pace, because I am about to complete the introductory chapter for the second volume, which is going to be looking at the period from 2007 to present, which is going to be focusing on former Prime Minister Bruce Golding and Portia Simpson-Miller and current Prime Minister Andrew Holness.
Why are we not surprised that that is the case, Dr. Not surprised. And that gives us a great segue into my next question, because your study focused on the communication strategies of Prime Ministers Michael Manley, Edward Seaga, and PJ Patterson. And I particularly am curious to find out, what were some of the similarities and the differences that you discovered in your research?
Well, there were, you know, if you look at the three leaders, one, coming out of the research, there are 5 things that I regard as very important in the politics of Jamaica. One, you look at the whole issue of the personality. And as you look at Michael Manley, Edward Seaga, and PJ Patterson, you see there are differences with the 3 leaders. Michael Manley, of the 3, was most charismatic. And I mean, I pointed out that he was probably the most eloquent of the 3. But eloquence does not amount to communication. It's much more than that, right? Mr. Seaga was a very technocratic, shy, and individuals regard him also as having autocratic tendencies. But Mr. Seaga in terms of his personality, you would realize that he has a strong connection to the Jamaican people, through culture, which I will elaborate on or just mention shortly. And then you have Prime Minister Patterson, again, was a more laid back, technocratic leader, but he had a particular way of connecting with the people, because when he is on the ground amongst the people, you can hardly make a distinction with him and them. So the issue of personality, then the issue of culture plays a pivotal role, and that is one of the major similarities between the three leaders, because Mr. Siaga was very much involved with the cultural formulation of Jamaica, with African retentions and also the reggae music. Likewise, Prime Minister Patterson, who was involved with the Scatterlights as a manager at one point in time. Then you have Michael Manley, who was very much involved with the culture as well. It was during his period, whilst it is that we used to have meetings and people singing their various hymns and so forth. It was during the 1976 period that we saw the first record being placed on a vinyl and using to transmit messages in a national election. So that was very much instrumental in terms of their similarities in terms of culture. And I mean, again, the language, all of them have played and utilized the local language in their communications when they are out in the field interacting with the citizens. Then you have the issue of fear mongering, because you will see from the book that the issue of fear is a clear and present concern amongst Jamaican citizens. And that has been utilized by the leaders, especially on the part of Mr. Siaga in national elections, right? So those are some similarities and some differences that exist between the leaders that I've detected in terms of the research and the book. And, it's all there laid out, in the book that individuals can read and contextualize and analyze and criticize.
So based on your research now, give us an short indication of some of the conclusions that you drew or that we can draw concerning the approach to political communication in Jamaica. Where did you come to any defining moment in your research? What are some of the conclusions that you came up with?
Well, one of the things that I want individuals to understand is that there are some clear approaches that the political parties have utilized in terms of communication strategies, and these have been etched in their historical antecedents. I pointed out in the book that the Jamaica Labour Party emerged out of a situation or is closely linked to the British Conservative Party, and so they are largely a conservative political organization. The PNP, on the other hand, has antecedents and links to the British Labour Party, and as such, they are a liberal democratic organization. And these, in the context of political communication, pitch their programs and policies within a particular framework. And that framework I outline in the book as freedom and order. And the programs and policies that they implement have been formulated within those contexts. That is why you see the JLP have and place an emphasis consistently on the management of the economy, whereas on the side of the PNP, they have consistently highlighted the social order, the social agenda. And all the strategies that the leaders have sought to communicate have been etched around those areas. And whenever the PNP focus on its social agenda, it does well in the polls. When the JLP emphasizes and focuses on its economic management and order, it does well. And we are seeing that in the data. So, there's a number of things other things that I have pointed out there, how it is that the media itself has impacted on the political process because, with the liberalization of the media, people are now moving to the media to get information, whether it be through traditional television and radio. They have been swamped with information. But whilst they have been swamped with information, the political parties have retreated from their traditional spaces rather than sought to modernize the mechanisms for disseminating information. And it is what I regard as a level of lethargy and laziness on the part of some of our political leaders to transform the group and brand structures so that they can communicate more effectively with the citizens and get the citizens engaged in the political process.
I am curious to find out, and perhaps others on this platform are as well. You're an active participant in Jamaica's political process. While you were doing this research, did you find that there was any conflict of interest? Did you find it difficult to remain objective in writing the book?
Well, I am an active participant in the political process, but I'm also a professional. And I am a member of the academic community at the University of the West Indies. And credibility for me matters. And you can't manipulate the data to support your political viewpoint because that is going to impair your judgment and cause your character to be questioned. And I've never heard individuals publicly questioning my character and my integrity, and I don't intend to start it today. And so I analyzed the data and I interpreted the data based on what was presented. And, I did a lot of what we call in research triangulation, where, whilst you have the information at your fingertips, you use different sources to corroborate the information that you have. So, I would draw on works from sources such as the Gleaner, the Observer, the Daily News, the Social and Economics study, the Social and Economic Survey of Jamaica. There's a lot of work that has been done over Salices that I interrogated, and all of that contributed to what I regard as a fair and balanced book. And then finally, you know, when I was at Karamak, the late, great Agri Brown taught me about values clarification. And he said to us that the social scientists can't be objective, but what we have to strive for is fairness. And he outlined the process by which we achieve fairness. And that process, as I have used to guide me in my professional and my research work.
A member of our Zoom audience is asking, how has communication strategies of selected political leaders served to engage citizen participation during the last general election? In other words, you know, how do you assess the strategies and citizen engagement during the last election?
Well, one of the things with the last election is that a number of factors have impacted on the participation, but you will notice that the JLP has managed to take out their base support, although they might have seen a decline of probably about 28,000 votes from the 2016 election. But what they did was to pitch their communication strategy around the leader who had enjoyed immense popularity amongst the populace. And so he was the driver of their communication strategy. And that is why you saw in the lead up to the election, for example, when you had the COVID press conferences, he was there leading the press conferences. And not only that, he had another minister who was regarded as one of the more popular ministers in Minister Tufton, assisting in that process. So you had two individuals who were enjoying significant favorability ratings of the populace, assisting in the process. And whilst there was a decline in the numbers, they managed to motivate, they managed to inspire greater confidence in the supporters of the JLP, and they came out in a pandemic, in a crisis where there was significant fear. And remember, I talk about the whole issue of fear mongering, the issue of fear, which drove a number of individuals away from the process and stayed home, but they were able to inspire their supporters to come out. And we can put a number of reasons why the PNP, on the other hand, never got the chance to mobilize and inspire their voter support. Because the truth is that, I mean, if I might say this, that the organization was suffering from significant disunity, and the campaign or the internal elections of 2019 never assisted the process, because there was a serious assault on the incumbent leader, and the communication that was transmitted to the society was that, look, this man is unelectable. And the Jamaicans have a saying that say, boy, if shark come from down a river bottom and say alligator down there, so it go. So, you know, it manifested itself in terms of how the city responded to the PNP.
My penultimate question now comes from the group again, the Zoom group. How do you see this book impacting your role as rapporteur to transform the lives of the largest minority in the population, the persons with disabilities, comprising 50 to 20% of the general population?
Wow. You know, I'm happy that somebody put that one in, that nobody can accuse me of everything that I do try to put in the disabled. But the truth is that a very, very good question, because apart, in the book I spoke about strategic communicative action. And this is where you have to design your messages for particular target audience, and you have to systematically move to engage these individuals. And the engagement can't be just a top-down approach. It has to be an integrated approach where you get those individuals involved. And this is where I am pressing for greater involvement, greater inclusion of persons with disabilities in the broader society, because their views matters as well. And this is why I'm very happy to be a part of the political process, because one of the big messages that former Prime Minister Patterson used to transmit to Jamaica, that he wants all Jamaicans to be involved in the process, was my appointment in 1998 as a senator. And it sent a big signal to the population of persons with disabilities that, listen me, man, the persons with disabilities matter. And I am pressing for greater inclusion of these individuals in the Jamaican society and in the broader society, because the more we have these individuals at the decision-making table, the more we'll be able to get more development of within our society.
My final question, Dr. Morris, what do you hope readers will take away from your book? What is the message, the ultimate message that you want to send them through the medium of this book?
Well, the ultimate message that they will have to take from this book is that communication matters. And not just communication, but effective communication. And there's a number of things that contributes to effective communication. It all has to do with the individual and their personality. It all has to do with the language that they use. It all has to deal with the medium in which the media in which the messages are transmitted, as it is said that it is the media is the message. So communication matters. Communication matters. That's the major takeaway.
I wonder what Marshall McLuhan, who is responsible for the quote that you just...
Yes, McLuhan, yes.
I wonder what he would make of the society in which we live today, and the plethora of media in which we, through which we can now send and receive messages. I wonder what he would make of it. Thank you so much, Dr. Morris. Ladies and gentlemen, I now call upon Kellyanne Morris,
video now stopped,
who will now give us the vote of thanks. Mrs. Morris.
Mrs. Morris?
Yes, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
You are using an
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
currently untapped. Audio
Most
setting.
Honorable Percival Patterson, Senator Matthew Samuda, Professor Sir Hilary Beckles, Professor Hopton Dunn, Miss Eulalie Greenaway, Mrs. Janet Mornan Green,
Video setting.
members of the University of the West Indies community, or distinguished guests.
Tab.
Dr. Floyd Morris was brought up by his mother, Sister Din, to believe that giving thanks and expressing gratitude openly is as essential as the air we breathe. I wholeheartedly endorse this principle, and it is my pleasure to move the vote of thanks on his behalf. In everything give thanks, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus concerning you. 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 18. I thank the Lord for his continued goodness and for his blessed presence today that was so mightily invoked by Dr. Michael Harvey. We thank you, Dr. Harvey, for your effective, fervent prayer and spirit-filled presence. Professor Sir Hilary Beckles, how gracious and thoughtful of you to share your time with us as you brought greetings. Your words were eloquent. Your ability to creatively communicate our history unparalleled. You inspired us as you shared that the work of art will outlive the author, bringing thought and enlightenment that not only is Dr. Morris committed to country, but is courageous enough to do something about it. Our heartfelt gratitude is extended to Sir Hilary Beckles, and your friend Floyd continues to pray for your success in all you do. Thank you, Miss Eulalie Greenaway, for your fitly spoken and accurate remarks. The interplay of faith and courage in the author's life was correctly identified, as well as his ability to be objective, fair, authentic, and frank without any hint of his political color. This is indeed an excellent quality in an author with known political connections. As you concluded, this is a story to be continued, and Dr. Morris in his interview segment has already stated he's working on part 2. Professor Hopton Dunn, lecturer, PhD supervisor, friend, colleague, and mentor to Dr. Floyd Morris, sincere thank you for joining us tonight, your time from Botswana. Your overview was clear, objective, and just enough to ensure we still need to buy the book. You highlighted the key issue that communication can be a game changer for political parties or groups. Constant, active political communication is necessary not only at election time. Professor Dunn, thank you for sharing that this book is timely for the Caribbean region, as there are 5 upcoming elections by December 2020. Mrs. Janet Mornan Green, the consummate media professional and who did excellently at chairing the program, thank you for a job well done. Your quiet wit and tone radiated warmth, which engaged us and made our time together enjoyable. The publishing and launch of this book by Dr. Morris would not have been possible without the efficient services and constant support of the marketing and sales department of the University of the West Indies Press. Many, many thanks for the capable guidance, coordination, liaising, and top-class execution of this event. To our guests and audience, we say thank you for joining us virtually today. It demonstrates that we can remain connected and celebrate safely, although we are apart. We pray continued blessings on your lives and that you will indeed purchase a copy of this well-researched and balanced work, Political Communication Strategies in Post-Independence Jamaica, 1972 to 2006 by Floyd E. Morris. Thank you, everyone, and continue to have a great day.
Thank you, Mrs. Morris. Thank you so very much. Ladies and gentlemen, what an afternoon we have spent together. Permit me to endorse the sentiments expressed by Shelly Ann. Permit me also to thank again all those who participated, the University of the West Indies for hosting this event, and of course, Senator Dr. Morris for providing the occasion for us to be here. Thank you all for your attention and attendance. The book obviously contains important information from which we can all benefit. Please go out, get your copy, and share with others, especially during this holiday season. We may be social distancing, but we can still exchange gifts. Thank you for your attendance. Thank you for your participation. And on behalf of Senator Morris, good afternoon.